He could not even trust a transfer man to another job within the department without the approval of the commission. This and other problems with the structural remnants of colonial government plagued his career as Attorney General. His main objective as Attorney General was to straighten out the legal court systems that were in place during the colonial government's rule and to expand laws in accordance to the new constitution. Fixing the system that had been in place was made especially difficult by the fact that British Colonial Office never felt the need to have a legal expert in the colony to draft laws and organize the legal system. He was also a consultant to President Nkrumah on legal matters concerning the forming of new laws and in matters concerning constitution. The most controversial law Nkrumah was to pass was the Preventative Detention Act. When Geoffery Bing heard on the radio while on holiday that President Nkrumah had arrested R. Apansa, who was the General Secretary of the United Party, on Madisto Apulu, who was the deputy leader of the opposition in Parliament, he felt that everything he had been working towards had suddenly collapsed. He had been opposed to preventative detention in the past, especially when he was in British Parliament opposing similar legislation in Northern Ireland. Bing may not have agreed with the idea of preventative detention, but he did see the possible need for it in Ghana at that time. In Ghana, there was a major rift in government. There were the pro-Nkrumah people who supported a republic that followed the Scandinavian socialist model, and then there were those of the United Party, a collection of anti-Nkrumah political organizations, who supported a system of chieftaincy put in place in the colonial government. The Ghanaian legal system at that time was not capable of dealing with political crimes like treason or sedition because of the shortcomings of the legal system. The idea that those opposed to the Nkrumah government would hinder efforts to reform the system, thus perpetuating its inefficiency, would lead to it never being fixed. In a compromise, it was decided that the act should be used. It was not to be used against politicians in general or members of government. Bing was still opposed to the act, but it proved to be useful shortly after the bill was passed when a tribal conspiracy was discovered. In this situation, it was shown that there was need for preventative detention to ensure stability while the still fragile government infrastructure was still being built. When it came out that Nkrumah had arrested members of parliament, Bing felt that nothing had gone terribly wrong. In the ensuing trial concerning the conspiracy, the reaction from the international community was extremely negative. It would continue to be negative concerning Nkrumah's government. By 1961, Bing had decided to retire from the position of Attorney General because he was fatigued by the work he had been doing and needed a change. He was growing tired of the struggles of building the legal structure and, as he said, wanted to be rid of law and the duties administering a department. Though he was relieved of the heavy burden of duties of Attorney General, he stayed on to work on developing the education system and took on a president professorship. He was, too, remained in Ghana to carry out certain assignments. Among his new certain assignments, he worked on civil reorganization, methods of preventing corruption, and international diplomacy. He maintained this non-committal position until February 24, 1966, when the Nkrumah government was overthrown. That morning, Mr. Bing and his wife were warned by friends that if they were caught, they would likely be killed, so they were smuggled to an Australian High Commission. When the rebel regime made a formal demand for his arrest, Bing surrendered. He was then beaten by soldiers and police that took charge of him and thrown into prison cells. After a month, he was deported and had lost everything he had owned in Ghana. All he had left was the money he had on him at the time of his capture and was unable to recover most of his possessions from his home. This is the story of Geoffery Bing's experience in Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah. He was the first Attorney General of independent Ghana and played a key role in its development. He helped write the Constitution of Ghana and attempt to build an effective legal system to administer it. He was also demonized by the foreign press of Britain, in particular for being the creator of the Constitution that allowed him to be a dictator for the creation of Preventative Detention Act. He was often cited as a communist, trying to create a social Soviet republic and to spread it to the rest of Africa. It is true that Bing and Nkrumah were socialists and believed in a united Africa, and this struggle continues today and does not seem any closer to becoming to fruition. In their attempt to unify African nations and liberate from the colonial powers still controlling them, they became victims of the same powers for defying the British by making Ghana a truly independent nation in the face of strong opposition. This was unacceptable for the colonial powers because, as being said, in the circumstances of power war politics of the time, it was regarded as communist, not because of the ideology of its supporters, but because it attacked a supposedly fundamental instrument of European stability, the disunity of Africa. Today, the new threat is that of neocolonialism and the economic exploitation of African states by transnational corporations, a prime example being the diamond trade in West Africa. This new threat must be reorganized. As Kwame said, people of the colonies unite, the working men of all countries are behind you. Kwame's role in non-aligned movement was due to his goal to provide world peace. The presence of the Cold War and his vision of global peace put his ideals against those who favored imperialism and colonialization. The non-aligned movement was called to counter foreign presence in countries that suffers from imperialism, colonialism, colonialism, racism, Zionism, and all forms of foreign aggression, occupation, domination, interference of hegemony, as well as against a great power in bloc politics.